Hello and welcome everyone on this official platform of Legacy IAS Academy. What if your home, your land, and even your family were split by an invisible line, drawn not by your will but by the empires and the modern states? What if your very identity was declared as illegal on the one side and suspect on the other? This is not a fictional dystopia. It is the reality of Naga people straddling Indian Myanmar border. And now, with the Indian government scrapping the free movement regime and starting the border fencing. So, a storm which has started brewing, a powerful rebel group which is called as National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muvia, has sent a chilling message that we will not allow the state's hegemony to go unchallenged. Is this a security measure or the spark that could reignite one of the South Asia's longest running insurgencies? So stay with me because today we will uncover the political powder that is keg unfolding in the hills of Nagaland. A story of division, a story of identity, resistance, and the shadow of war that the world needs to hear. So, as you can see here, this is the headline today in today's newspaper that will not allow states' hegemony to go unchallenged, mentioned by National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muvia. As you can see here, these are the headlines. Now, what happened recently? So, let me tell you first of all that the NSCN-IM, that is National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muvia, they have published a strong statement in the latest issue of its news bulletin, that is Nagalim Voice. अब Nagalim Voice में इन्होंने क्या पब्लिश किया? In that, they have opposed the scrapping of free movement regime by the government of India. Now, first of all, what is free movement regime? आप सभी ने सुना होगा. तो अब ये free movement regime क्या है? So, let's try to understand. Free movement regime क्या है? ये एक instrument है. And this allowed people, especially tribal communities like Nagas, who are living along the India-Myanmar borders. Nagas, जो दोनों तरफ ही रह रहे हैं, India and Myanmar borders, so that they can move freely across the border up to how many kilometers? Up to 16 kilometers. जो भी नागाज जो इंडिया में और जो म्यांमार बॉर्डर यहां पर जो रह रहे हैं, they can move freely without any visa or passport, है ना, up to 16 kilometers. Now, why it is important? It was important for the Naga people who were living on both sides of the border, as their families and communities are divided by this international boundary. Now, what did National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muvia, say? अब इनका क्या कहना है इस पर? So let's try to understand. Now, this National Socialist Council of Nagaland, that is Isaac Muvia, अब इन्होंने क्या कहा? Now, this group has said that Naga people, they have suffered under the Indian state for more than 75 years. And now they will not allow this oppression, that is free movement regime जो खत्म कर दिया और जो fencing हो रही है border की. Now they will not allow this operation to go unchallenged. Now, in Nagalim Voice newspaper, that newspaper also says that we need to recall our history. जी हाँ, उस newspaper में इन्होंने ये भी कहा that we need to recall the history. Now, how and why? So first, let's try to understand. Now, first of all, try to understand. तो इन्होंने historical evidences की भी बात की है कि जब ब्रिटिश का रूल हुआ करता था, that means during the time period of British India, then India after 1947, and then Myanmar, that is at that time it was called as Burma, Naga people, they were treated as less than human for the administrative convenience of the ruling powers. And Nagas were split into the two by the international boundary line between India and Myanmar without their consent. बिना उनके consent के उन्हें divide कर दिया गया है with this international boundary line. So in India, Nagas were further split across different states. Now in India, Nagas are further split into the different states like as you can see here, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, as you can see here in the map. So in India, these Nagas were further split across the Assam, Nagaland, Manipur and Arunachal Pradesh. Now in Myanmar, they were placed under the Sagaing and Kachin state. जी हाँ, तो म्यांमार में इनको कहां रखा गया है? इन म्यांमार दे आर प्लेस्ड अंडर दी सगाइंग एज वेल एज काचिन स्टेट. नाउ अपार्ट फ्रॉम दिस, National Socialist Council of Nagaland, that is Isaac Movia, they have criticized the government of India for scrapping the free movement regime. अब as you can see here, these regions है ना, सगाइंग रीजन, काचिन रीजन, जहां पर नागाज रहते हैं, है ना. Now apart from this, NSCN-IM, they have criticized the government of India for scrapping the free movement regime. कि ये जो free movement regime को हटाया गया है, this decision is not viable. And government started fencing the borders along the India-Myanmar border. Now, this अब उनका कहना है these actions of government of India, that means they are ignoring the emotions as well as unity of Naga people who are living on both the sides, and that is why mass protest started. इसीलिए mass protest शुरू हुआ है. तो Nagalim Voice न्यूज़पेपर में ये भी मेंशन किया गया that mass protest rallies have already happened and these protests have shown a strong rise in the Naga nationalism more than ever before in their political struggle. And apart from this, the aim of Naga political struggle is to protect their history, is to protect their culture, political identity as a people as well as a nation. Now, apart from this, they have also given the warning of escalation. Ji haan, wake up call. So NSCN-IM said this is a wake up call for what they called a final showdown with the government of India. And protesters, they are seen holding the banners with these, काफी तेजी से इस प्रोटेस्ट को प्रमोट करें. एंड द स्लोगन, अब एक चीज याद रखिएगा, स्लोगन क्या है? नो सरेंडर, नो रिट्रीट. एज यू कैन सी हियर, नो सरेंडर, नो रिट्रीट. तो ओवरऑल, National Socialist Council of Nagaland is Movia, which is a Naga group. Now NSCN-IM is angry at the Indian government for ending the free movement regime and starting border fencing with Myanmar. And they also say that this disrespect the rights as well as dignity of the Naga people who are living across the border, and they recall their historical injustice and the warn of growing protest and calling it a moment of final resistance. So it can have various impacts. So the scrapping of this free movement regime as well as response of NSCN-IM, it can have multiple impact. How it can have multiple impact? It can have political impact, security related, social impact, especially in the Northeast India Myanmar border. Okay. Now, so let's try to understand their impact. So how political impact will be there? So let's try to understand this political impact. Now, political impact. A political impact क्या हो सकता है? Breakdown of trust between the Naga group, especially NSCN-IM, and government of India. NSCN-IM and government of India. So there can be breakdown of trust between these two groups. Now NSCN-IM, they see this fencing move as betrayal, especially after the decades of the peace talks, and it could weaken the Naga peace process also, especially the 2015 Framework Agreement, which was signed between NSCN-IM and Government of India. Then there can also be rise in Naga nationalism, and it may intensify the demands for greater autonomy or even independence. It could also inspire these sentiments in other ethnic groups along the border, Kukis, Chins, Zomis, all these groups. Then what are the security impacts? अब इसके साथ ही साथ security impacts क्या हो सकते हैं? Now, what can be the security impacts? So let's try to understand that there can be increase in tension and well as the potential violence in the border areas. Border areas में tension हो सकती है, violence हो सकता है ना? In the border areas of Nagaland, then Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur region. Clear? So NSCN-IM and other insurgent groups, they may resume or escalate the militant activities, calling it a final showdown. Then India-Myanmar border becomes more volatile, especially with armed Naga groups who are operating across the borders. Then border fencing, so जो border fencing की बात की गई, so this border fencing might also lead to the clashes between the Indian security forces as well as the local communities of underground groups. Then apart from this, there can be social as well as humanitarian impacts. Now, social and humanitarian. Now, social and humanitarian impacts. How? Now, try to understand. Thousands of Naga families, they are living across the India-Myanmar border, and they are going to suffer. They will suffer restricted movement, because restricted movement to meet the relatives, attend funerals, cultural events, as well as trade also. Then there can be disruption of the traditional tribal and the village ties that existed long before the international boundary was drawn. Then there can be loss of livelihood for the cross-border traders as well as the farmers. Then it could also increase the alienation of the Naga people from the Indian state, which reinforcing the feeling of being divided and neglected. Then there can be diplomatic impact. There can be diplomatic impact. Now, how diplomatic impact can be there? It may strain the India-Myanmar relations, especially if border fencing and military activity increase. India's border policies, it may seen as unilateral and insensitive to the tribal realities, also possibly inviting the international scrutiny over the indigenous rights. Then apart from this, there can be symbolic impacts also. Now, how symbolic impacts? Now, these things can be seen as another example of hegemonic Indian state who are ignoring the indigenous aspirations. Then the slogan, no surrender, no retreat. This slogan reflects the deep frustration, and it could become a rallying cry for the future mobilization across the Nagaland. Now, in this scenario, how Indian government should respond? So the government of India needs a multi-pronged, sensitive as well as strategic response to address this NSCN-IM concerns, as well as to avoid the escalation also. But how government of India should respond? So they should respond, first of all, reopen the dialogue. Ji haan. Reopen dialogue between Government of India and NSCN-IM. Reopen the dialogue. Urgently resume peace talks with National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muvia, under a neutral and respected interlocutor. Then assure that scrapping free movement regime is not an attack on Naga identity, but a temporary measure for national security, especially due to the Myanmar crisis as well as insurgent spillover. Then address the perceived breach of the 2015 framework agreement and clarify its status as well as what will be the next step. Then second, government should respond through addressing the Naga sentiment. जी हाँ, address Naga sentiments respectfully. Now address Naga sentiments respectfully. Now recognize that the Naga issue is not just about the territory, but about their identity, their history, their dignity also. Promote symbolic actions. Acknowledge the cultural as well as historical unity of Naga people across the borders. Avoid language or actions that sound dismissive or militarized. Ensure Naga voices from both India as well as Myanmar are consulted in the decisions like border fencing. वहां म्यांमार से भी उनकी जो डिमांड्स है उनको सुनना चाहिए, जैसे आपने डिसीजन लिया बॉर्डर फेंसिंग का. Then another important thing could be review the free movement regime scrapping. जी हाँ, गवर्नमेंट क्या कर सकती है? गवर्नमेंट कैन review the free movement regime scrapping with the safeguards. See, instead of total scrapping, consider temporarily suspending the free movement regime in highly sensitive areas. Apart from this, creating a permit-based regime for the genuine cross-border movement. Then allowing controlled, that is allowing controlled cultural, religious, family access across the border under the surveillance. Then involve here tribal councils as well as civil society in monitoring the cross-border movement to prevent the misuse. Then apart from this, improve border infrastructure. Improve border infrastructure as well as communication. So shift focus from military fencing to inclusive border governance. Like government can set up India-Myanmar tribal committees for managing the cross-border ties. Improve border roads, communication as well as healthcare in remote Naga inhabited areas. Then educate the local communities about the reasons behind any changes or reducing fear as well as rumors. Apart from this, border political and constitutional reforms. Political and constitutional reforms. How? There is a need for fast-track political settlement for the Naga issue, including the greater autonomy as well as self-governance. जी हाँ, Naga issue. Greater autonomy and self-governance. Self-governance issue under which article? Article 371A. जी हाँ, under Article 371A. Now, greater autonomy and self-governance under Article 371A or a new constitutional arrangement is needed. Then consider an integrated cultural council or regional body for Naga across the states. Ensure representation of Eastern Nagas, okay, and Myanmar-based Nagas and their voices in discussions. That is also very important. Then apart from this, there is a need for regional as well as diplomatic coordination. जी हाँ, how regional and diplomatic coordination? There, India needs Myanmar support. So work with Myanmar, including ethnic stakeholders, to stabilize the border region. Then engage with ASEAN. जी हाँ, engage with ASEAN as well as United Nations bodies to show the commitment towards the indigenous rights as well as peaceful resolution. So these things are needed. तो अब अगर आप ओवरऑल चीजें देखें, borders may be drawn in ink by the diplomats and the rulers, But for the Naga people, they are etched in pain as well as memory. So splitting not just land but their lives also. And the barbed wire here of modern statecraft, it cuts through the ancestral connections, and one must ask, can national security come at the cost of indigenous dignity? Is it possible? That is why NSCN-IM fears response is not just a warning, it is a reflection of decades of unhealed wounds and unresolved promises. India now stands at the crossroads. Negotiate peace with respect or risk the resurrection of the conflict in a region which is already on the edge. So the world must watch not just as an observer but as participant in a greater conversation about borders, about belonging as well as justice. Now, if this video moved you, if this story moved you, don't just scroll. Share, discuss, and spread the word, because this story goes far beyond the Nagaland. And this is about how we treat the voiceless, and that affects us all. Thank you so much.